Good morning. It's an art fair weekend. It's September and I've set my booth up in the backyard to be part of virtual art fairs. My strategy has been to set up the booth and give you stories behind the work. And rather than change the inventory for a new view today, I decided to talk a little bit more in depth about color, hand weaving, and being a production weaver. In order for me to make all these lovely garments, I need cloth. So a loom is used, and I plan on 100-yard warp. One of the skills I have, and certainly one of the passions I have about weaving, is creating color. So I have brought this color wheel that hangs in my sewing studio that represents swatches of fabric I have woven over the years and the colors that they represent. So what I've been doing is working my way around the color wheel. Now, I don't just do a few yards and then make a garment. I have learned to be a production weaver, which means I think in terms of making more than one garment. I've learned to think in terms of doing 100 yards. Part of this is because I had a contract with Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood to recreate some historical fabric for the upholstery that's in the lodge. That was my first 100-yard project. I have an AVL fly shuttle loom, not mechanized, it's all by hand, and that was the first time I had the mindset of what it takes to create 100 yards of fabric. 100 yards is the length of a football field. It's a lot of fabric. Having finished that project, it just seemed to make sense to continue working in that same quantity mindset. You have to order more materials. It takes a while for them to get here, and then you have to carefully warp the loom and then begin to weave. I have a love of color. I have a painter's love of color. And one of the things I find fascinating about weaving is the fact that with weaving, color is not blended like it is in paint, but it is side by side or pixelated. So I pulled out something we call a weaver's gamp. That's a new word today, gamp, G-A-M-P. A gamp is a record or a sampler of both warp and weft and how the color interacts. So this is a sampler for a long warp that is a multicolored warp. And one of the things that I think it's important about what I'm able to do is no matter what the warp colors, I'm able to work, because of my sense of color and side by side how that works, I've been able to create both red and blue, pastels and greens and grays, the black and back into other greens, and a brighter blue. So to work from both sides of the color wheel, red, blue, green, and neutrals on one warp and have them be successful is a challenge, but I love doing it. What happens is the warp colors unify a 100-yard warp. So that particular production run is related. The foundation threads relates the colors. Some close-up views. Here's a yellow on a red toned warp. It's very bright. And then here is a fuchsia on a red toned warp. I have a preference for the fall colors, and this is one that's in a brown. This is the espresso brown. Same warp, done in the orange, and then done in the neutral. I love these kind of projects and this way of thinking. This is also what makes each one of these garments unique and special. I learned a lesson from watching the ocean, which is nearby. As you know, I live on the Oregon coast, is that the ocean is not just blue. The ocean has a depth of color. There are more than one shade of blue. And with that knowledge, I have figured out that my fabrics need to have color depth, so they tell that story. The fabric is interesting both far away and close up. So that's the story from the booth today. Thanks for listening. There'll be more tomorrow. Bye for now.